Okay, good morning to those of you tuning in Australia and Asia. Good afternoon to those of you in the U.S. and Canada and North America. And I know that those of you in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa will probably be catching this on replay. But I'm really pleased today to have a very special guest on the Packard Network live from Melbourne, Australia. We have Mr. Andrew Willoughby here. And Andrew is a very unique and special guest, and I'm going to take just a couple of minutes to explain why here. It might take me a couple of minutes to get through this, but Andrew's got 35 plus years of experience in both the Australian and Asian financial services area, as well as enabling technologies, and very broad background. Inspired by excellence, he's an experienced senior executive and an independent delivery consultant specializing in translating a strategy into execution, which is where the challenges always are in any firm that is transforming. Part of what it's doing is how do you take that strategy and actually make it happen? So we're going to talk a bit about that today. Andrew has extensive experience governing, mobilizing, and implementing business startups, major transformations, remediations, fixing problems, divesting businesses, and post-merger and acquisition integrations. So very broad, organic, inorganic, both aspects. Andrew is the person that really has that down pat. He's operated, for those of you outside of Australia, Australia has something called the Big Four banks. In Australia, you've got NAB, Westpac, Australia New Zealand Bank, and
CBA.
CBA, Commonwealth Bank of Australia. Thank you, Andrew, for the help there. And startups, turnarounds, facilities management, policing, logistics, telcos, even mining, being very big in education as well. He's experienced the complete business cycle in many of these industries and understands the risk adversity concept in a lot of detail. And so Andrew, with that as kind of a backdrop, welcome to the program. It's great to have you here.
Thank you so much, Brett, and thank you so much for the invitation, and hello to all your viewers around the world here on the Packard Network live.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. Really appreciate that. And I'm going to we're going to start. We're live streaming on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter and YouTube. And I'm going to most of the dialogue will kind of start with LinkedIn, which is where we get most of the engagement. So. Yeah. Those of you that are logged into LinkedIn, please do tee up your questions as Andrew and I have a discussion around an array of topics, and they can be as challenging. The more challenging and complex the question, the better it is. And it can be for Andrew and or myself, and we'll both have a dialogue around that. So we'd love to have the engagement. It'll really make this come alive. So please tee that up. And the same holds true for those of you on Facebook. About midway through this, I'll check into Facebook as well to make sure we're picking everybody up. But right now we've got Gary Spencer. Gary, thanks very much. I enjoyed meeting you, Gary, from Birmingham, I believe. Gary and I met the other day over in the UK. It's quite late there, so thank you for tuning in so late at night, Gary. We've got my friend Steve Sellen in. We've got Alexandra Egan in from, I believe, Melbourne or Sydney. Not sure. Alexandra, thank you for tuning in. It's great to have all of you here, and we got a few more people trickling in. So we'll just kind of get with it. Andrew, did I leave anything critical that you've achieved in your career out in the intro? I'll start with that.
Oh, I think you did pretty well, Brett. Thank you very much for that intro and for those words. Look, my career has, like all of our careers, been unique and interesting in its own way. Absolutely, and certainly something that's brought me great fulfillment in my professional life. I say to people, Brett, it's been a career in two unequal halves. The first half, the first 20 years, I worked for other people and organizations and worked my way up in quite a traditional approach, to climbing the corporate ladder. And you know what, the good thing about that is that you learn how a dollar flows through the organization. You learn how a customer gets served. You learn how to deal with challenges and problems and people day to day. So the first 20 years of my career, was really valuable from the perspective of learning and applying things and working my way up from the mailroom to the executive suite. The second 15 years, so unequal half, the second 15 years that I'm still in, I've been working for myself and bringing my knowledge to the market in a different way. And I've enjoyed that just as much, but it is a little different. And though I'm the same person, the perspective's a little different when you walk into a client style relationship instead of an employer. So that's a summary of my career in those two parts, and I've enjoyed them both, and I've learned from both.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I'm just going to kind of bring up something that's a little bit out of the box here. And Andrew, tell us a little bit about, you were a professional tennis umpire, line judge, I believe, and you actually were tapped on several times to call shots for John McEnroe during his prime. You want to tell us a bit about that?
Sure, I do. Yeah, I was, Brett. I was Australia's top-ranked tennis umpire for 4 years. A little while ago now, I actually saw a news article the other day, the anniversary of a particularly famous John McEnroe match. It's 25 years ago now, so it's a long time. But look, it was something that I did because I just enjoyed tennis, and I was a ball boy. And one day an umpire said to me, you've got a bit of attitude about you. You might want to see if you can get into this umpire's chair. So that kind of got me thinking. I was young, 17, 18, and I thought, okay, I'll give that a go. And it turned out that I really enjoyed it. I had some proficiency at it, and a bit like corporate life, I was able to work my way up into, I promise you start on the back courts in the midweek tournaments that there's nobody at, but you work your way through, you demonstrate some commitment. And I ended up at the Australian Open and was invited to Wimbledon and to Roland Garros in France as well. So I did 4 men's singles finals at the Australian Open, including the first one at the current National Tennis Centre on Rod Laver Arena, where I called the service line at both ends in the first ever men's singles final there between Mats Wilander and Pat Cash. And whenever McEnroe came to town and he was in his prime, then I would always get his matches. And you know what, Brett, the interesting thing about McEnroe was they sat us down and they said the key to understanding him is to understand what he's thinking when he's out there. And what he's thinking is, John McEnroe, I am working really hard. I am busting my butt here, giving you everything I've got. And I expect the same of you. So if you're sitting there, with your drink and in your easy chair, and you're there, not paying full attention to the game and, maybe looking around the crowd and so on, that's not what I'm here for. I'm here to give this 100% focus and effort. So it turned out that once you understood his mindset of that focus and that commitment and that delivery, that if you mirrored that and you demonstrated, and when I called an out call, I was really clear with and demonstrative with the hand signal, and I looked him in the eye, he related really well to that. And so it was confidence, right? It was projecting confidence. And so I got a lot of his big matches, including, unfortunately, when he was defaulted from the Australian Open. I was on that game, and I just enjoyed that intensity and of course his excellence as well.
Yeah, but so what you're basically saying here is that once you understood his mindset, you were able to, in effect, connect with him.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I
Yeah.
agree with that, Brett. That is what I'm
Wow.
saying. It was, and
Mm.
you're in a cauldron style of atmosphere there on center court, and everyone's watching you, and the cameras are on and so on, and you learn a lot about yourself in that environment. And I was still very young, 17, 18, 19. That's young, sort of, to be out there doing that. But yeah,
Wow.
you're right. It's about that focus and that intensity, and that there was a connection that we all had in the cauldron as we all played our own roles. And I was, of
Hmm.
course, not. The better I did my job, the less I was noticed, and that was the way I wanted to
Mm.
keep it. And
Right.
and yeah, it was a great learning experience, and I achieved more than I thought I would there, and really enjoyed it. Yeah,
Yeah, that reminds me of something fairly early in my career back in
yeah,
the San Francisco days when a guy named John Reed
right,
was the CEO of City Corp at the time before the merger with Travelers. And he came through California, and we had a business review and sat down with
right,
him. And I'm this young guy. I'm managing, a group of 25 branches in the East Bay, and
yeah,
and I'm telling a story right now of a failure to connect in business. So I'm going to tell everybody how I failed. So I'm sitting there talking about how my branches are building the business, and we're in the process of acquiring customers, and doing these, focusing on 10, something like 10 acquisitions per day per branch. And he took his readers off, and he says, now, and he looked at my boss and my boss's boss, and he said, now, I've told all of you that here in California, we have zero interest in acquiring other banks. So what are we talking about here? And, of course, everybody's just absolutely terrified. And of course, I wasn't talking about acquiring other banks. I was talking about acquiring, recruiting customers and attracting customers to come. So that's an example of not really the young Brett not understanding the mindset
yeah, yeah,
of the CEO at the time. Quite a powerful person. I survived it. It was okay. He understood. We laughed about it later
yeah,
I think we had a cocktail or something after the business review, and kind of laughed about it and everything. And it was a typical example of some young person, just not being able to talk in the CEO's language. And that was kind of bad on me at that point. Right. But I
right,
learned
right.
from it. And I wish I would have known in that meeting what you learned about John McEnroe.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What, Brett, what a
So,
great story, and
yeah.
how you took the positive, from it, and to that executive's credit, gave you the
Yeah.
connection afterwards. It reminds me of a very similar one I had, and will protect names for confidence. But a
Yeah, sure.
CEO came in for a meeting with us, and we were a small team in a young growing business, and he looked, and we thought we'd done a pretty good job, and we had great slides, and and he just sat back and he just said, "When are you guys going to make some money?"
Mm.
And that crystallized it for us. We just presented to him for 45 minutes, and so on.
Wow.
When are you guys going to make some money? That's what business is all about. And you've got
Hmm.
a great team and a bunch of great ideas. But when are you going to make some money? And I that impressed me. The cut through, the focus, the singularity of that. And it wasn't the only thing that was important to him, but it was very
Yeah.
instructive, right? When somebody gets to the heart of something with you, in,
You
in a
bet.
respectful but a clear way.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. And it is a way sometimes this is how it works in the business world, right?
Yeah,
Sometimes
that's right.
and that's what a CEO should be doing is,
Yeah,
let's just cut through the chase. One more quick story from the
yeah,
city days was that there was an individual by the name of Bob Lip, who ran the majority of the consumer business at City at the time. And he was an old Philip Morris guy, alumni of Philip Morris at the time. And he was brought in. Anyway, so there was a 200-page deck presentation they presented to him, and I was part of that presentation. And he walks in, looks at the table, and looks at this thick PowerPoint deck, and he said, "You know what we're going to do here? I'm going to fan this thing like I'm shuffling cards, and I'm going to stop on a particular page about midway through," and it was page number 113, something like that. He said, "We're going to spend 2 hours talking about this one page." And boy, did that really shake things up, right? Because that he was basically saying, "I'm not impressed with all this paper. I want to talk about what's important, but you put all this effort into that, so we are going to drill deeper." And it was amazing what this person was able to do with every word on that page, and it humbled all of us, right? So there are things out there. So I think for the viewers out there, hearing the story about connecting with people. That Andrew was able to do that with John McEnroe, that Brett failed to do it with the CEO. These are all learnings that you should be able to advise, to prepare yourself in the future, for these types of situations, and that maybe people are just interested in how are you going to make money? Just cut to the chase, right? Instead of trying to prove to me that you can kill all of these trees to make a 200-page presentation. Right.
Yeah. And that hasn't that changed in business, Brett, over the course of our careers and our time in it. And now it is about conciseness. It's about clarity. It's about, the purpose and the key message. And you know what? I think that's a good thing. I think things should be kept as simple and straightforward as possible. But there are some businesses, and you and I have each been involved in them, that are inherently complex. So understanding that complexity, but being able to translate and talk about it in a simple way is an important skill to learn, isn't it, Brett?
I think you're right about that. And I know Alexandra, I know you're on here, and Alexandra is from Melbourne, not Sydney. So just to clarify what I said earlier. So Alexandra, I know that you oftentimes with your clients talk a lot about the power of clarity. And I think you just heard Andrew talk about from his experience that is, we've seen this evolve over time, and those companies and firms and business owners that are able to be really clear about what they want is incredibly powerful. And so for those of you watching, make sure you connect with Alexandra as well, who knows that. And we have Steve Sellen here, who I mentioned. He's in Palm Springs, California, and Steve understands and writes a lot about connecting with people and the power of purpose and how to connect. So I think a lot of this stuff, I know it resonates with a few of you here in this particular session. But for those of you kind of hearing this for the first time, please extract the key points and the importance of connecting, and the importance of clarity, and the importance of making sure that you're speaking the language of your customer and each other. This type of advice, talking to a person like Andrew and tuning into the Packard Network Live, will save you years in your endeavors if you just embrace these concepts. So that's why we're here, actually. And Jane Lehman, welcome to the program. It's great to have you from Bourne, Texas. And we have Gary, who I mentioned. Gary said that Andrew, so Gary's got a comment here already. And
all right,
he said, Andrew spoke about being in the cauldron of the open tennis and having everybody watching you. He's got a question, though. In business, how do we make sure we're not playing to the crowd, but remaining focused like the tennis player on the why are we doing what we do? Many people play the business game, but yet few are successful and reach their full potential. It's a great question, Gary. Andrew, you want to take the first crack at that?
Yeah, for sure, Brett. Gary, thank you so much for your question. What a great question. Look, Brett mentioned just a moment ago about purpose, and I'm going to start my thoughts on this with that. The most compelling organizations I have worked for and with are ones that have clarity of purpose, but at the DNA level. Yeah. So they really believe in their mission and why they are here, and how they serve a customer, and how that customer's lives are improved and made better by their service or their product or what have you. So I'm going to start there. I feel that if that clarity of purpose is there, it is the highest order thing in the room. And there can be some big personalities, and there can be some public players and so on. But if people are there to serve the purpose of the enterprise and understand that the enterprise must and will continue beyond their time, and they have a short opportunity to be a steward of that enterprise's values and service delivery, and to improve it during their time there and make it better. I personally believe and have witnessed that keeps folk grounded. It keeps them focused on the outcomes that the enterprise is there to deliver. And sure, you can bring your own personality and dynamicism to the conversation, and we all admire leaders who have a measure of that. But that grounding to me, Brett, is and Gary, is what really resonates for me, and where I've seen good people do their best work in a focused way. How about you, Brett?
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly, one of the words I picked up in between everything that you said was to recenter and to keep going back to ground yourself in the purpose. Why are we doing this, right? And so I think all three of us saying the same thing. I guess the part that I'd like to comment on is, why are so many not doing that? So rather than just repeat and reaffirm everything that you just said, I'll kind of throw out there, and Andrew, I'd love to have your comments on this as well. Why are so many not doing it? And I think that, here in the US, for example, there's something going on that everybody's familiar with called the Great Resignation, where people, the pandemic, in my opinion, did not cause this, but it accelerated what was already starting to happen, which was a disconnect between leadership and the changing needs of different generations of employees. So, for example, just throw out one example of the cost of a mother's daycare, whether they're a single mother or married, a full family. Companies' failure to understand what the economic constraints are around the cost of daycare. Now, firms that responded to that didn't have any issue, and they're doing just fine. But when the pandemic hit and everybody went into lockdown, a lot of mothers in this example suddenly realized, it's not so risky if I just walk away from this. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing something that's essentially, for many mothers, a cost neutral situation? So I'm paying out a big part of my salary in daycare, and the firm's not doing anything about it. So why am I doing that? Well, now we're locking down. They're cutting back on staff, et cetera, et cetera. So maybe I can leverage this thing called digital technology and do something on my own. And so they kind of get off the corporate playing field and get on the sidelines, right? And so I think the question is, why did that happen? And that's what I'd like to throw out. So in my view, I think for probably the past decade or so, there's been this hunger for short-term profits. We all hear about the Wall Street mentality and just deliver your number, DNA, deliver your numbers always, DNA, right? So why firms are doing that, and we will cut and burn and do whatever's required to make the number, and put profits before people instead of people before profits, as one of my former bosses used to say. So I think that's really the root cause of why so many, Gary, do not do this. Is that they're much, and Gary, I happen to know in your business from our conversation the other day that your unique selling proposition, Gary Spencer, for those of you that aren't following him, please connect with him, that his USP is to deliver the unexpected. Okay. And I'm not going to get into Gary's business right now. You can connect with him and he'll let you know that, but your USP needs to be centered around people, and that includes your employees. Andrew, what do you think about that?
Yeah, look, I like the sound of that, Brett, and there's a lot of distractions around, aren't there, in business? I mean, look how things have evolved over the last 10 or 20 years, and the number of things that are now possible, right? And that's primarily a good thing, but the focused individuals and the successful businesses are the ones who can make purposeful choices and stick to them and see them through. Yeah. And change, we all know, is a constant. And adaptation is also terrific. And the pandemic you mentioned has compelled us to adapt, and in some positive ways as well, in my view. But I still come back to this notion of, why aren't people doing it? Well, they're distracted or they're disengaged. And so find the why, find your why, and then find how to execute in the why, and where you make your contribution and feel comfortable, because we've all got a role to play. And if we each think of people we admire in business and colleagues we enjoy working with, they're ones who are at once themselves and are also at once people who believe in the mission and can tell you what it is and demonstrate it in their work.
Yeah, I think you're right. And just to kind of close out on, Gary's given us another comment, his view on this as well, and that Gary feels that people, even business leaders, are always looking for a validation from other people, and they respond to that validation. So when it's not there, right? So that can create a whole other, their own identity maybe becomes fuzzy and that type of thing. And that's really the downside of that. Gary, I think, I think that's one of the things that's causing this as well. But the bottom line is, when you add it up, because of all these things going on, there's this lack of connection, just like the young Brett that I mentioned with the CEO many years ago. That lack of being able to connect, with the employees of these companies is just causing the employees to say, look, I'm going to get on the sidelines. I'm not going to do this anymore. Right. You look at a Generation Z. I'll give you an example of somebody I spoke with, I don't know, a month or two ago, a Gen Z person, and his boss walked up to him in the office and noticed that he had something up on a screen, and it turned out to be his side business. And the boss said, look, can you please not do that when you're at work? And this boss was Gen X, my generation, right? So you got a Gen X boss, a Gen Z employee. The Gen Z employee looked back at the boss and said, okay, I know you don't want me working on this at work, but please stop sending me emails at 8:00 at night. And that's just the reality of the world, right? So that boss is interrupting this person during their personal time, but yet they don't want the person to work on their side gig during the business day, right? So that's just the reality, right? And the Gen Z person says, hey, I'm not going to deal with this, right?
What a great story, Brett, and
Yeah.
there's a generational story in that, isn't there?
Yeah. There
and
really is, right? I mean, in our day, Andrew, in the early days, if we saw somebody doing that, I mean, that was completely unacceptable.
Yeah, exactly. And it just so many different dynamics in that story. What a great story. And I remember working with you, Brett, fondly, our time working together and managing people together. And it is about proximity, isn't it, Brett? It's about getting out of the office, out of your office, and walking around and making connection with people, demonstrating you're valuing what they're doing, but firstly that you're understanding what they're doing. How many times do we see in feedback surveys, senior leaders, they don't get it, they don't understand what I do, and that connection, that authentic connection with people, and that desire to understand what they do, they see and recognize their pride in their work. It just makes so much difference. And in fact, I'll go further and say, Brett, I don't even try to do it. It's just the way I do it, right? I'm not making an extra effort, but it's just how you do things and how you connect with people, and people know, right? They know, and they respect it.
They do, and it's no different than the amazing story you told 10 minutes ago about you found a way to connect with John McEnroe under pressure. Yeah. This wasn't on the side over dinner, right? This is on the court, business, in his prime, right? At a Grand Slam event, right? The Australian Open. And you found a way to connect when the pressure was on. We're going to talk a bit about pressure in a few minutes, but
all right, great.
That's amazing, right? So we need leaders to understand that it's really about connectivity, and the solution to the Great Resignation resides solely in this concept we're talking about connectivity. It really does.
People leave bad leaders, don't they, Brett?
They do.
They lose
They do.
engagement, they lose value that way. So yeah, great points you make.
They do. And the cost to the profit line, not just of turnover, but all of the diluted productivity prior to that turnover, right? So you've got a lot of soft costs and hard costs right there on the table, and it's billions, right? It's just amazing. Okay, let's see, Andrew. Before we kind of get going, I'm going to give all of you on LinkedIn and Facebook the priority here in our conversation. So thank you for teeing all this stuff up. Jane has said the pandemic has accelerated the inevitable. We were already headed that way. She likes the term "the Great Transformation."
Oh yeah,
it's a great comment, Jane. I agree with you. We have Vincent Liu here as well. Vincent, type in the comments to let me know where you're at, and I'm going to read your comment here right now. We've got Vincent says terms of reference of the industry is very important as it relates to audience clarity and shows industry awareness, confidence, and experience, I believe. So it's a great comment, Vincent. Yeah, makes sense. I think Andrew and I both agree on that. Steve is weighing in here talking about how digital technology has transformed the job market and the pandemic accelerated it. So we got a common theme. He's got a question for you and I.
All right.
Do you feel with the advances in AI, artificial intelligence technology, will be much of a factor in the future job market?
In the future job market, yes, I do, but perhaps in a different way. Firstly, I have worked with organizations who have begun seeing how AI can actually benefit their operations day to day, serving the customer, doing things to help the humans do their jobs better. So to the extent that Gen X and professionals of that generation are rising up through the ranks, they are bringing an openness to that manner of working and to those technologies, and see their potential and are trying to integrate them into businesses that have probably, many of them, been there longer than they've been alive. So I think it's fascinating as a younger practitioner coming along to be so, I'll say, native with, and if not open to, new technologies such as AI and machine learning and so on, and find yourself in an organization that's kind of been doing what it's been doing for a long time and has a very established product set and client set, and say, what is the innovation opportunity here? How can I make the case for this technology to be considered? So yeah, my take on that question would be there's an opportunity for practitioners of all generations to understand the potential of a technology such as AI or machine learning, and then find the case to bring it to an organization. Perhaps it's a young organization, but often it's an older one that can benefit its bottom line and its people. And it's not about job replacement. It's about augmentation. It's about making the humans able to do what they do uniquely better. Brett, what's your take?
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks, Andrew. And Steve, it's a great question. And I have a very, talk about clarity, a clear view on how I intend to use AI. And in reference to your specific question, Steve, about the job market, I believe that humans and our brain is far more complex than AI will ever be, basically. And I believe it's a matter of learning it and employing it instead of the other way around. So a lot of people are worried, okay, robots are going to come in and take over our jobs. If you look at what's going on in Japan, they have hotels now in Japan that's run 100% by robots, right? Okay, that's fine. But my approach is, rather than say, oh my goodness, the robots are coming, why not look at it this way? Why not look at it and say, how can I, Steve or Brett or Andrew or Jane, how can I learn about this and put these things to my advantage? So as a business owner, as a manager in business, or an employee in business, and I'm not a manager, and you're talking about the job market, how can I specifically learn what AI can do? I don't need to be a programmer, and then how can I use it to my advantage? So how can I, for example, use this beautiful smartphone. It's not a phone, it's a computer that makes a phone call. How can I use this for 30 minutes every day on my job to build a new skill? Okay. Not to scroll Facebook and not to play around, not to play an arcade game. You can do that. That's fine. But how can I use this as a resource to better myself and stay ahead of the curve? And because it's just a matter of time before this handheld computer is driven by all AI, right? It's just a matter of time instead of by apps and, you know, this other stuff as well. So you don't need to learn it all now, but you need to have the mindset that I'm going to employ this. So if it's a job market, back to your question, Steve, you know, you're looking at, okay, robots are going to run hotels. Robots are going to serve food buffets in Las Vegas. You know, they're going to, you know, do this and that. They're going to be self-driving cars. You know, if you listen to Elon Musk, cars are a very small component of his vision for what AI will do. Okay. Cars is just one mechanism that AI will actually deliver, but it's going to be much more. Space exploration, all of this stuff wouldn't be possible without AI. Reusable rockets, you know, all of this stuff as well. So I think it's important to understand it and to figure out how every one of us, whether we're an employee or a leader, can figure out how to employ it. Just like Andrew and I right now, and all of you that are participating in this stuff right now, that we're on this particular live program that wasn't possible when I was growing up in the 1970s. We're employing this technology right now to share Andrew's 35 years plus my 30 years. So you got 65 years of knowledge right here, plus the audience that we're engaging with, a couple hundred years in this audience. You had Gary, Steve, everybody, Alexandra, everybody here. There's hundreds of years of experience right here in this 1 hour program that we can employ AI in the future. And that's kind of my long-winded take on this point. Yeah. Great question, Steve. Yeah. Thank you. Jane Lehman says, YouTube videos. Yeah. You know, I mean, if you want to learn how to do something, Jane, you're right. Go to YouTube. You know, there's this guy that I look at here. I happen to know Andrew as well. Andrew and I have known each other for a number of years, and we've worked together in the trenches under a lot of pressure. And we're going to get to pressure in just a couple minutes. But Andrew and I are both big Apple fans and users, right? And we love that. And you know, there's a guy on YouTube. His name is Aaron Zolo, and he's my go-to guy for all of the software workings and how everything operates when Apple does a software release. He can tell you how to use the 65 new features. And so you're right, Jane. Go to YouTube, and if you need to know how to fix a leak in your roof, go to YouTube. You know, you can do that. You know, it wasn't always that way, right?
The democratization of information is just fantastic, isn't it? I also watch Aaron Zolo's blog, and you know what, Brett? He's straightforward, isn't he? He makes it accessible, and yet, you know, he treats us all. You know, he treats you equally as somebody who understands it, but just needs a little cut through, a little helping hand as to, you know, here's what it really means. So I find him very impressive, very straightforward. But you know what I also like there, Brett, you mentioned YouTube and your platforms and so on, is the opportunity it's given for content creators such as yourself to have the narrative and to share views and to bring people together as you do right here on the Packard Network. And you know, that's just so impressive. You don't need permission to do it. You don't, you know, and on the other side of business, if you've got a problem, a challenge with an organization, whatever, you can bring that now to the organization's attention, you know, a lot more readily. You don't have to wait and get through some filter and write a letter and so on. So, you know, I'm just impressed with the way the customer is now in charge and is able to, you know, create content, is able to give you feedback, is able to help you grow your business by in near real time. If you're prepared to listen to it, give you real time attenuation of your product and your service. How good's that for everybody?
Yeah, it's just a win-win. The
Yeah.
customer-led society, customer centricity at its very
Yeah.
best. And for those of you watching, and also on the replay, those of you that will be catching this, I just put the link to Aaron Zolo's Zolo Tech
Zolotech. Yeah.
YouTube page. So please subscribe if you are an Apple fan. Steve's saying that he's an Apple fan, and because this guy can break down the details of the Apple WWDC keynote into
Yeah.
weekly, what you can do right now to learn what this phone can do for you. Anyway, AI is coming soon to the phone and to everything else. So you can better to embrace it, find out how to employ it. Jane says, I look forward to the day when we won't need electronics to tap into each other's minds. We will eventually be able to communicate without external devices. Yeah, you're right about that. We just can't comprehend it yet. It may not happen in my lifetime. May not, it might. I think you're right, Jane. I agree. I don't know when it's going to happen. And I'm not a tech programmer, so I'm not going to claim to be, but I'm smart enough to know that I'm going to employ all this stuff as best I can, just like we're doing on this broadcast right now. And I think companies like Apple will make it so simple that a person like Brett Packard be able to use it. So, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. Vincent Liu says, 5-minute meditations, 10-minute audiobooks. Yeah. 10-minute self-observations.
Yep.
I think that we're going too fast on a daily basis and we don't stop to listen to ourselves with intention. I'm so glad you brought that up, Vincent. And that's going to be a great segue. I'm going to defer the pressure part of our conversation in favor of your comment and lead into something that I know Andrew is passionate about, and I am too. Andrew writes a blog, and he's going to tell us how we can access that blog before the broadcast is over. But Andrew recently wrote a great story about slowing down the game when the pressure is on, right? So the part of this is related to pressure. But Andrew, maybe you could talk a little bit about what do we need to do to Vincent's point, to sometimes we need to listen to ourselves with intention. What's your take on that? How does that relate to how you manage these $100 million plus programs that you do for big companies and that type of thing? Maybe you could kind of talk to us in simple terms about how we can apply some of your concepts that you use in companies to basically listen to ourselves.
Yeah, for sure, Brett, and Vincent, great observation as well. I love the word intention. Let's be intentional. We're here for a short time to make a difference. Let's be intentional about what we're doing, and that then guides our behaviors and our actions and our priorities, and good things then start to happen. Yes, Brett. It's a sporting analogy. One of several that you and I tend to share and take a measure of inspiration from. But if you think back, and your viewers watching here, think back, any of them might be into sport themselves, yourselves. Sometimes in an interview, post a big play in a game, somebody's just won the game, with the team. The interviewer asks them, "Oh, what was going through your mind, in the big moment when you scored the touchdown or when you kicked the winning goal or hit the winning run?" And if you think that they will often say, "Well, I was just trying to slow the game down and find my way to contribute or find my pitch to hit or what have you." And look, it just occurred to me one day, Brett, a little while ago, that I'd heard that phrase almost subliminally, watching those sort of interviews over as many years as I've been watching sport, big time sport. And it occurred to me, what, there's something in that. And when we're under pressure, we are the same people, and we are very aware, I think, of the need to execute now and to make a difference, whether it be a comment, whether it be making a decision, whether it be setting out some protocols that we need to follow or priorities. So I have found it instructive to say to myself, you know what, I just want to slow the game down here a little bit and just be me and give myself a little bit of time to think and remind remind myself of, as Vincent said, of the intention that we have. We've got to get through this challenge and find an answer. Maybe it's in the context of a deal or a business transaction. Let's come back and find our intention. Why are we here? What are we trying to achieve, and so on? You know what? Therefore, I think the right decision is to put this first, for example. And really, that's an example of applying it. It's not me saying, okay, I need to go into a little room, I'll walk around the block for half an hour. Can you guys hang around and I'll be back? It's just about telling yourself, you know what, just slow the game down a bit here and distill it to its essence. There's a deal, there's a blocker, there's one person here that cares about this particular facet, another person cares about this particular facet. What do I value in that? Well, I'm a delivery practitioner, Brett, and so what I value is us moving forward. So I reconnect with that intention and say, you know what, let's find a way to get those two folk into a room offline, away from the bigger group, to talk about their differences, where I can facilitate a conversation and find common ground. Big believer in finding common goals. So that would be an example of how to apply that in practice. See a situation, slow the game down. Maybe passions are a little high, tensions are a little high. Slow the game down. Say, okay, I need to move this forward. I need these two folk talking. They're struggling to do so in the broader audience. Let's bring them into a smaller room and let's help them find their common goals again. And once they find it, I reckon we can get agreement and we can return to the larger room and we can move the deal forward. So that's an example, of how to slow it down, recenter, and then find a way forward.
Yeah, and I know from I'm not going to really repeat that. I agree with it all, and I know from our working together that I've seen you do that even with me, right? And we get on the side and we just have a frank conversation with the smaller group, recenter, reground ourselves, and then go back in, and within I don't know what 24 hours we're back on track, right? And that's what can happen. So it is possible. So don't write off your mission, your vision, if you run into choppy weather, or if you run into incompetence or some sort of big hiccup with resources in whatever you're doing, or if it's even with yourself. Don't give up. Just step away, slow down. And the higher, correct me if I'm wrong, Andrew, but the more the pressure is on, the better this works.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does. And one thing people say, Brett, I would imagine about both of us, but I can only speak for myself, is, you're calm. And I like to think, you know what, I need to not only model that, but I need to be that. When the pressure's on, I need to be the calmest person, in the room. And I really take a lot of pride in trying to live to that and saying, you know what, the fundamentals haven't changed here. Tensions are high because of the situation, but we need to get from where we are here to where to this next point. And here's some ways to do that. So, and I've seen you do it, Brett. You're a very calm leader under pressure. And when people are losing their heads around you, you're the one that's able to just pull the right people together and say the right things to us to calm us down, firstly, to remind us of our purpose, and to suggest some constructive ways to move forward. And another thing I think is not to disempower people, right, Brett? We work with teams, we lead teams. We have to believe the answer will come from the team. They just need a little help with the timeout. Someone to just come in, maybe back to the umpiring days, and just come in and just take a little time out. So it's all right for us all to breathe and think here. There will be an answer. So there will be an answer. Let's find it together. And you know what? Here might be the way forward. And I've seen you do it. I do it. And it's very effective.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we're seeing here is the high correlation between what it takes to win at professional sports and the mindset. And how that applies to business, right?
Yeah, great.
Andrew, I'm noticing that photograph of number 42 on the wall behind you. Could you just explain to the audience? I know the answer here, but I'd like for the audience to know, because I think that's important. Why is that picture hanging up in your office?
Sure, Brett. It's
And
it's
who is that, by the way?
Yeah, 42 for the New York Yankees. Mariano Rivera from Panama, now retired, said to be, and the statistics say, the greatest closing pitcher of all time for any team. The first unanimously and only unanimously elected player to the Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame. But above all of that, just an outstanding human being. I was fortunate enough actually to meet Mariano and have lunch with him there in New York. And I spoke with him for 90 minutes over lunch. And I tell you what, it was one of the most meaningful, moments and compelling moments in my life, and just an outstanding performer, athlete, and quality individual. Respect your opponent, play the game hard, play to win, demanded excellence of himself and all those around him, a peerless ability to execute, in his case, in his given vocation. But just a great example, I think, Brett, of translating that into something meaningful for me in a very different field. And there's a photo of me with Mo, and I'm in my suit and tie and so on, because that's kind of the world I come from, and so on. And I'm just inspired by that belief in excellence, that humility, and that ability to be very good at what you do and inspire people around you to bring out their best, because it is a team effort, isn't it, Brett? We lead teams, we work in teams, and I saw just on LinkedIn yesterday, I think, a post from someone that just reminded us of that great quote. When you were appointed a leader, you weren't given a crown, you were given the responsibility to bring out the best in others. And I look at what I think Jack Welch, I think, was the quote. But I think when I look myself, and we all find different inspiration in different situations and people and faiths and so on, and I respect that. But what was resonant for me with Mariano was his humility, his belief in excellence, and his ability to bring out the best in all of those around him.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I think also that what I'd like for the viewers to also take away from this, Andrew is down in Australia, right? And beautiful, great country, awesome people, beautiful part of the world. A lot of the stories that you're hearing him talk about across sport, business, and we're talking big business. I mentioned that at the outset. A big part of it, Andrew also has an ability to make things happen, to connect with people like John McEnroe, okay, during the pressure, to go meet Mo. Okay, that number 42, they're behind him, and he just explained the story. To go meet him in New York, to make these things don't just happen by themselves. You didn't just bump into him on the subway, right, in New York. You got on a plane, flew halfway around the world, and had lunch with him. And that took an initiative. What I'd like the viewers to take away is that every one of you can make things happen for your dream, but positive thinking, okay, by itself does not work. Okay. Positive thinking and doing does work. Okay. You've got to make things happen. If things aren't going your way, then change up, right? Do something different in order to get things moving. Okay. Don't give up. You can keep your goal consistent. Maybe your overall strategy is the same, but the methods that you're using on how to get, in simple words, keep the what the same, maybe change the how you're doing it, but you can make it happen. If Andrew down in Australia can figure out a way to go meet his idol and have lunch, right? That's not easy to do, by the way. And we don't have time to talk about how you were able to make that happen, Andrew. But the point is, anybody can make things happen. And it comes down to attitude, mindset, but not just a positive mindset. That does not lead to success, right? What you've got to do is positive thinking and doing. And that's really the difference. So get on that plane and get going, right?
So important, Brett. And so many times I know working with you, when something was stuck, in a business setting, you would you would find a way to move us forward and take action. And I know, Brett, you're big on and your belief in culture, in organizations. It'd be great to to talk further about that. But one of the things I know you and I both believe in is behaviors, actions, things that you actually do and say and stand for are very important, and the actions that you take to put them into play. So yeah, great points you make there.
Yeah, that's good. I just want to acknowledge a couple of comments here.
Yeah,
Alexandra pointed out something, and I want to mention it here because I think that you and I, Andrew, have assumed that what she's saying here is in place, but she said it, and it's so important, right? She's talking about, she basically agrees with what we're saying, but it does take time, and we're also conditioned to implement the doing, that sometimes we forget that we're not so skilled at communication. And I know you're passionate about this, and we haven't talked a lot about it yet on this program. We've assumed that that's in place, but one of the things that Alexandra is talking about is if you get the relationship building component right, then everything can flow well from there, including communication. Any comment on that from your extensive experience?
Yeah, absolutely, Brett. Such a great comment, Alexandra. Communication is both overt and inherent, isn't it? It's what I've made the effort to say to you, but it's also what you know about what we stand for and what we're here to deliver and what the situation is that we're in at the moment. The other thing about communication, right, is it's a two-way exercise. I think a lot of, and generationally, Brett and I have been in business a long time, and in the early days, communication was something that was done by someone to someone else. Communication today is about two-way, genuine two-way communication, maybe more the dictionary definition of it, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's very good to hear how we are all feeling as a member of a team, and that we can all feel we can make a difference. And yeah, you're right, let's not assume that it's in place. And how many times have we all heard in business, I didn't know that was happening. No one ever tells me anything. Well, the opportunity is right here to address that, isn't it? And to keep our communications both overt and inherent up so that doesn't get said.
Yeah, and thanks, Alexandra, for pointing that out as well. It's obvious when we talk about it, but it is, as you said, Alexandra, it doesn't happen easy, right? The real challenge does come to doing this. So thank you for pointing that out as well. Gary has weighed in again and just made a comment here around the application of rhythm in our lives and work, such as pause, center, continue, should be like an internal language. He's found ways to do this and found the comers and it rests in those sentences, helping us move through the day, allowing others to find those moments of rest is vital to communicate the values. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense, Gary. Thanks for adding the value. And Vincent, thanks again for your comment there. I'm going to let the people read what you've written here, but I think you're talking a bit about the rule of 5 and that you use this to take in the big picture, and you've spelled out what you do here. So thanks, Vincent, for that. That adds a lot of value. So basically, Andrew, I want to talk briefly about something, a famous saying in business, people that are working on major programs like you do. And these are, some of these are big programs, right? And something called scope creep. Right. So and you recently wrote in your blog about something called that I loved project. I can't wait for your blogs to come out, and I'm recommending that everybody needs to subscribe to Andrew Willoughby's Substack blogs. We'll repost a replay of this discussion on LinkedIn, and I'll ask Andrew to put in the link and how everybody can subscribe to these. But Andrew, you recently wrote one called the Project Management Triangle, talking about scope, time, and cost. And I love that one. And my specific point is, you can say whatever you want about the triangle is fine, but I'd like to hear your view on scope creep, what that means and how people can overcome it.
Sure. Thanks, Brett.
Yep. Hmm.
Scope creep, we've all seen it, whether we've heard it called by that name or not, is
Yeah.
where we enter a project. So by inherently a finite initiative with a finite amount of time and money, and yet the sponsor or some stakeholders or even ourselves as participants suddenly see, we need to do more here than what we had originally intended to do. Now, in BAU, business as usual activity that's funded on an annualized cycle, you've got a little bit more room to put something off till later in the second half of the year, maybe to enable us to do a little bit more in the first half. But in a project or a program, which again is inherently a finite activity in time and cost, you find the situation where that's a problem, isn't it, Brett? You want to do more, you need to do more, and yet time and money say, you know what, it's going to be a cost. Something else has to give in order for me to do more now, right? And maybe it's going to cost more or take more time. Now, sometimes that's not an option. Sometimes you just have to find a way to manage it better. So it turns out what I have learned over my time is that very often we don't necessarily need to do more. We just need to do better. Yeah. And if we
Yeah.
think about that, right, and pause and reflect for a moment, where they're doing a program within a business context for the benefit of our customers and our stakeholders and shareholders and the like, they're not typically asking for more. They're asking for better. So
Right.
if yeah, right. So if next time, viewers watching here are in this situation, and you're thinking to yourself as a participant or as a stakeholder, we need more out of this and so on, change the word more to better and see
Yeah.
how you go then, right?
Great
And if
advice.
yeah, and if you and reflect that in a meeting, what if we do this better rather than more? And
Right.
the pressure will dial down, and the focus about what better actually looks like becomes the conversation, and that's powerful. So that'd be my take on it. How
Yeah,
about you,
what
Brent?
wonderful advice. Yeah, no, I agree, and a lot of that's a mindset shift, right? It's
Yeah,
just it's not there's not a lot of rocket science to it at all. And
yeah,
Andrew, we're just about out of time, and I'd like
yeah.
to just ask in this by asking one final question of you. And 10 years from now, 15 years from now, what would you like your legacy to be?
Oh, goodness me, Brett. That's a big question. Let me think. Answer. Firstly, I'd like to leave something behind for practitioners who are going on a similar journey to what I've been fortunate enough to go on in my career to learn from. So, Brett, you've been carrying your journals around for your career, and I'm so proud of what you're doing with them for the benefit of the community here on LinkedIn and in your various platforms. I've been carrying around similarly my unwritten book for many years. And I show people the table of contents, on a single page. Well, the blog, which is Beyond the Gantt, GANTT, Beyond the Gantt.substack.com, that blog is my opportunity, Brett, to find a way to deliver progressively. So rather than wait for my book and finding the time to put the printed and bound version together, what I've found is something I do in business with my clients is find ways to deliver progressive value. I've taken some of my own medicine and I've put that blog out there now. So it's much easier for me to get messages out there. There's no cost or anything. Just go and read it and access it.
Yeah.
So I'd like to leave something for the folk coming along behind me. And Brett, I know you and I both reach a point in our career where you've delivered things, but what you get the most fulfillment from is helping other people and the example that we can provide for others coming along behind us. So that'd be my
Definitely.
best answer to your question, right?
Yeah, and I'm confident that just to wrap up, thank you, Andrew, and that's a wonderful legacy, and I have no doubt that you'll be able to look back, and so will tens of thousands of other people someday, and they will describe your legacy that way. What I would essentially say is that the for those of you that have stuck with us for the hour, and those of you that will be watching this on replay, there's a lot of wisdom here that will literally save you years with whatever you're doing. So get out watch it again, get out your own paper and pen. Nothing would please Andrew and I more than to hear from you 2-3 years from now and say, hey, I took this concept and this is what happened. Right. I mean, that's why we're doing this. We're not doing this for any other reason. Isn't that worth an hour of your time to hear the concepts that we've talked about, the correlation between sports, using John McEnroe as an example, one of the greatest of all time, right? And how Andrew was able to learn how to connect with him under pressure and then apply that in business, right? How I, Brett Packard, failed early on in my career, shared that with you as another example on how to do it. These are learnings on how to keep speak a common language, whether you're speaking or not, how to be resourceful, get on an airplane and go meet your sports idol, have lunch with your sports idol. You can do it. It can be done, right? So I think that there's no excuse not to do it, but don't just think positive. Positive thinking is not going to get it done. Positive thinking and doing will get it done. So with that, Andrew, I'd like to thank you this morning. It's wonderful to have you on the program at the start of your day. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to be here on the Packard Network Live.
Thank you so much, Brett. Thank you again for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. And to all the viewers, thank you also for your time this morning and investing the hour with Brett and I, and encourage you to reflect on what we've been able to share here and make it real and tangible for you. And as Brett said, take action.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Andrew. And all of you, I look forward to seeing all of you next week on the Packard Network Live. Thank you for your time.